We're the Hoeys, and we're here today to discuss hiring quotas of women in IT fields. We reviewed a number of articles and blog posts for this video, ranging in date from 2008 to 2014.
In reviewing these articles, we found that there are differing opinions on this contentious issue. But before we get into the idea of the quota issue, first we must ask, is there a shortage of women in IT and technology fields?
Well, that is a subject that we've actually been discussing all semester. We all know the answer to this. It's yes. And many of the articles that we read also touched on this phenomenon. Many articles, they pointed out that there are not enough women in IT careers. No one argued against this. In fact, every article that we read touched on this in some way, shape, or form.
Now, amongst these articles, they did discuss many different reasons that women do not enter the IT and technology fields. These include the male-dominated culture that we talked about in class, the fraternity mindset of coders, and male-dominated computer science aspects, the geeky image of the computer programmer, the late hours that programmers do work, and in particular for women who are family-oriented, the fact that taking maternity leave, even only a couple weeks, could leave them behind where technology progresses very quickly. They could be out of the trends.
And there's quite a bit of discussion about whether or not quotas should be used in IT fields to help raise numbers of women working in these technology fields. So that brings us to our next question. Should hiring quotas be imposed to encourage diversity in technology fields?
Well, before we answer that question, Beth, let's start off with what a quota is. A hiring quota is a goal a company sets to try and encourage diversity, whether it's a quota to hire a certain amount of males or females, or people from different ethnic backgrounds. It's thought that these quotas, these mandated goals, help encourage diversity in the workforce and allow for a difference of opinion amongst the coding teams or the management teams. So one company in Australia, ThoughtWorks, has a one female hire per male hire policy. So if they hire one male, they will hire one female. And it goes to even so far as they will tell a prospective hire that if we hire a male and we want to hire another one, we'll say, hey, look, we really like you and we really want to hire you, but we need to hire a woman first.
And again, at ThoughtWorks, the lack of women in the industry, it's openly discussed and addressed at the workplace. And Lindy Stevens, who's the Australian managing director, of ThoughtWorks, she points out that there's a 50-50 gender split throughout all of the positions in the Australian branch of ThoughtWorks. And she points that out as a way of saying, look, we are encouraging diversity in the workplace, and this is how it works with these quotas for these one female graduate per male graduate hire.
Now, out of all the articles that we read that we've linked to in the description of this video, ThoughtWorks was the strongest supporter of hiring quotas. There were different ranges that people said, yes, it's okay, no, it's not okay. But ThoughtWorks was, yes, we're having a hiring quota, it's one-to-one, you're not getting anywhere beyond that. So ThoughtWorks was very strongly for these hiring quotas for gender.
And there's another argument for a quota from Dr. Black of BCS Women. And she said, to make a difference quickly, I would argue for a quota or for getting organizations to work together to leverage capability, reach, and impact.
Now, it's really interesting that she said that because just the previous paragraph before, she talks about how she's not in favor of quotas. She sees the quota aspect as like a quick band-aid to really get it jump-started and then just take it back. And this is something that was talked about in one of the later articles about critical mass, where they're trying to get a flood of women in, so that'll help balance, and then there'll be role models, is the whole point. Is we get the females in, that'll get the female role models in, girls will look up to them, as we talked about in class.
And then it'll get the ball rolling for encouraging more women to enter the IT workplace. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of the articles that we read that when we did our research, they mostly had a resounding no, that quotas will not help encourage women to enter the IT workforce, or if they do enter it, it might not be for the right reasons. Now, in a survey of IT workers by cwjobs.co.uk, 77% of workers believe that there are too few women employed in the technology industry, And 71% of the people who answered that survey oppose introducing quotas for hiring more women, which is pretty interesting.
Seeing that there's not enough women, but we don't want to mandate that the women have to have the jobs.
Exactly.
In one of the articles, the affirmative action in computer science, a hiring perspective, this was the article of the professor who was supervising the section leaders for a computer science class. And as she wrote this blog post, she's wondering, the professor's wondering, well, I know that in order to get more females in, typically they say, when they look at females going into computer science, look up to the section leaders, and there's a lot of section leaders. So if they have more female section leaders, chances are that there's going to be more females going into the computer science program. But in her post, she says that the main problem is that affirmative action can cause the fallacy that women are bad at computer science, and that causes it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy much too easily. Realistically, she says, that unqualified women will just reinforce the gender fallacy, and successful will inspire, but successful men can inspire as well. And overall, affirmative action, or the hiring quotas, does more harm than good. And this is because if you get somebody who, because they get hired because they're a woman, they may not have the skills. So they are not doing as well. Nobody will look up to them, or they'll say, really, women are bad at computer science. They were only hired because they're women. So this professor says, what we really need is something that is much more difficult to implement than a quota. We need to change the culture surrounding engineering, as well as to encourage these women with high potential to pursue engineering. So it's not saying we need women who have high potential, who can be those role models, and who want to be those role models to come in, instead of a quota.
Yeah, and that'll help change the culture of computing. And from another of the articles that we read, it was a blog post on the Female Perspective on Computer Science blog, their entry, Affirmative Action. The author talks about how hiring women, just because they're a woman, doesn't make much sense unless it comes down to the point where there's a very small group of candidates for a specific position who don't have anything that sets them above each other. They all have the same set of skills, they all have the same set of qualifications, and the only difference is their gender. So that is when it might make sense to say hire a woman over a man in a specific position if they have the same set of skills and you're working towards having a more diverse workplace. Hiring people based on gender alone, as she points out, as Bryan also said a second ago, it increases the chances that the person that you hired for the job is not exactly qualified for that job. If you're just hiring because they're a woman, they might not, as Bryan pointed out, they may not have the requisite skills they need for the job.
And this has been seen across racial divides as well as gender divides. If you hire somebody just because they are a certain race or a certain class or a certain gender, and they're not qualified, they will fail. They may fail at the job. They will. They may fail at the job, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And when I was in the article from the article "Diversity is not a quota system," this quote that I pulled from the article really speaks to me, especially about the whole. This is exactly what I feel about hiring quotas in IT. Quotas are for retail numbers and sales, the quote starts out with. The author says, they are not to be mistaken for a concerted effort towards having a more diverse workforce. Diversity is about making good faith efforts and taking calculated actions to hire, attract, select, and ultimately retain diverse candidates. Now be clear, the diverse candidate does not get by on gender, race, or ethnicity alone. They must be qualified for the positions that they are applying for.
That's key, is that they're qualified for those.
Exactly.
All right, so we talked about the people that say yes for quotas, people that say no for quotas. Now, if we're not going to go with quotas, what can be done instead of quotas to encourage more women to enter the technology field? And there are several articles that discuss this, particularly the ones that say no, we don't want quotas. So they offer alternatives. So Lindy Stevens, the Australian Managing Director of ThoughtWorks, says that we should make companies more appealing to women. And in this, I actually like that she doesn't focus primarily on women. The language that she uses is really interesting for this. So she says, make a company more appealing to women. For example, ThoughtWorks offers an 18-week parental leave at full pay for the primary caregiver when a child is born, and 2 weeks to the secondary carer. And there's no waiting periods for the benefit to kick in. As soon as you're hired, you get that benefit. And what I like about this quote, this part of it, is to focus on the caregiver. So it's not saying male or female. It's whoever the primary caregiver is, whoever the secondary caregiver is. So there's a little bit of equality and balance in there that I really appreciate as a male. So...
Yeah. And another thing that can be done to help encourage women into IT fields without using hiring quotas is by showcasing role models to help encourage people to enter the field.
And this is something we've talked about in class a lot.
Exactly.
We need role models.
And so there are women's groups such as BCS Women, which is mentioned in one of the articles that we reviewed. They try to showcase, it's a group that try to showcase role models in the field to help bring attention to women that are currently working in computing fields. And so they showcase female role models that are in public and private domains. They also demonstrate how to use computing as a tool to empower women. And they also work on developing talent spotting for promotion in high-profile positions. So there are many different ways you can make your company more appealing to women as you're trying to encourage more women to work for your specific company.
So Beth, we've covered a lot of the quota stuff for hiring. What do you think overall? Since I'm curious, what do you think?
Well, as most of the articles that we've read have pointed out that they're not a fan of hiring quotas. I'm not a fan of hiring quotas either. I feel that it's not going to fix the problem, and it might hurt it instead, as it was pointed out by some of the articles that we reviewed. And if companies are just aiming for hiring to meet a specific quota and not actually based on the qualities that the job needs and the qualities and merits of a specific applicant, the quality of the work of that new employee, what they might produce might not be up to the company's standards, and then the company will suffer as a result, and then also it will continue to perpetuate stereotypes, as Bryan had pointed out earlier. And then while I agree with Lindy Stevens' goals to make a company more appealing for women to work at, I don't think offering maternity leave is going to be enough. I mean, what about those women like myself who don't plan on having a family? I mean, I do not plan on having children, so the maternity leave option or parental leave option is not a drawing factor to me. So there should be other ways to make a company more appealing to work for, like having a more welcoming work environment, for one thing, and showing that it's not just the male-dominated programmer computers, the male-dominated environment where it's just, your stereotypical computer geeks in the office. Maybe showing, yes, this is a more diverse place to work. What about you, Bryan? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts can be summarized in 3 words. Equality over quota. So when Lindy Stevens was talking about the equality, but a little bit the caregiver part, I really appreciate that. All of this makes me think of Universal Design for Learning that we teach in the School of Education, where the focus is on not just making it beneficial for one group of people, we're making it beneficial for everybody. If you want to make this more attractive, don't just focus on trying to make it more attractive for women, try and make it more attractive for everybody, make it more inclusive to everybody. You want it to be focused on merit. Okay, and there's a lot of talk about Australia being a meritocracy, and that's why they're focusing on merit, and then so the quota with ThoughtWorks is a little strange. But finding people that can do the work and be good role models for that is going to be key. The whole point is we need role models. We don't need numbers. You don't need an army to flood in the critical mass that one article was talking about, but you need people who are good at what they're doing, people who can teach others, and people who can inspire others. And if you get those, and you get them in enough number, because you don't just want 3 or 4, you want some, but you don't want to just throw any women in and say, okay, some of them will be good, some will be bad, but at least there's women. I don't really agree with that because, as we said before, you perpetuate the stereotype. So finding quality and putting them in high-profile positions, not just because they're women, but because they deserve it, they've earned it, is going to be really important.
Definitely. Well, I think that's everything from us. So share what you think about our discussion in the comments, and we will keep an eye on things and answer. And maybe this might spark some interesting debates. So
you can feel free to read the articles that we looked at. Those are posted in the description of this video.
And thank you for watching.